We proceed now to item 5, public input, and there has been one request made, and that request has been accepted, and it relates to the item on our agenda regarding the Dockline tram. And I welcome Puneet Dal and David Kaywood to the meeting, and they will take advantage of the 5 minutes for public input to make a presentation and take questions. So right now I will hand to Puneet Dal and David Kaywood from the Dockline Tram Citizen Group. Kia ora, both of you. Are you with us, Puneet and David?
Hello, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. I'm going to attempt to share screen now. Just one moment. Sir, can you see a picture of me on the screen?
We can see your video and we can see an image of 2 trams coming our way.
Excellent. So you can see me with my children and 2 trams.
Correct.
Okay, excellent. And it's coming large enough for you to see?
Yes, that's fine, Puneet.
All right, thank you, sir. Well, I'll commence. So here is the tram depot. What do cities become when the voices of ordinary people are disempowered from the planning process? This is what they become: concrete jungles. For 10 years, our own CCOs, together with corporate elites, have been manufacturing issues that give reason to dismantling the vision of a city centre tramway connecting Britomart to Wynyard. They've used every trick in the book. We've had so little time to respond to this thing that they're going to present to you today. We don't even know what it is, really. An internal review. We feel like the apparatus of government has dealt a sudden, cruel blow to us. What breath our movement has had has been sucker punched out of us this week. Our members are disenfranchised, not because they don't believe in the vision or love the tram, but because they no longer believe we can fight the power. We, the government, we're feeling more remote from the governing than we've ever felt in this matter. And if you think you can be friends with the corporate set, you can't. They'll turn your compromises into concrete. They'll take any green spaces you've got and they'll turn it down. I want you to know I speak for tens of thousands of Aucklanders whose voices called for the waterfront tram vision 10 years ago to be incorporated to the waterfront plan. I speak for hundreds of thousands who have ridden the tram since then. I speak for thousands who are passionately campaigning for the vision to be actively advocated for by our leaders. Actively. I speak for my 2 sons, and I speak for their children and our future generations. Why? Because climate is the only thing on our agenda. Transport is 48% of carbon emissions. Concrete is 4% of global emissions of CO2. Mass public transit is the only solution for our cities. Every ton of CO2 we save is gold dust. And that mass public transit cannot include roads because of the congestion and the concrete issues. We've just got no more time for the blah, blah, blah we've been getting in the last 10 years. This report and its various manufactured consents is blah, blah, blah. I hear that we're hemorrhaging money. It's blah, blah, blah. I hear that we've had a good run. It's blah, blah, blah. I get asked, don't you think, how does this thing link to the wider transit system? It's blah, blah, blah. The only thing that matters is the conservation of CO2 for our children. And that's why I speak for the future generations. Respected councillors, you are the body, but we, the people, we're the heart. And we must work together. You, the few, and we, the many, if we're going to live together in peace and love. So please today, listen to your heart. I'm going to talk about how we should have had 10 glorious years. I'm going to talk about how we've been immobilised and we're being consigned to history. I'm going to talk about the mirage. I'm going to talk about the fair go. I'm going to address some objections. I'm going to give you some good news, the stuff that your apparatus should have been doing and never did because they were so busy trying to fight us. I'm going to give you our recommendation and our conclusion. You see, by now, we should have had 10 glorious years of this tram working in Wynyard Quarter. Had we had uninterrupted full-time services, this brand would now be dug deep into the Auckland consciousness as a waterfront treasure. And you know what? We'd be well on our way to working towards the original, mandated and ongoing popular vision of a waterfront transit system combining both heritage and high-speed trams. Instead, for many of the 10 years, this asset has been immobilised. The active voice of thousands of ordinary people have been expertly disempowered, and the tram infrastructure clumsily immobilised by a handful of corporates and senior level attachés. Why? We think it's because these CCOs have been unable to balance their commercial objectives while exhibiting some sense of social environmental responsibility by having regards for the interests of the community in which it operates. And you can see that unbalance when you just look at any of their minutes. They use this Section 72 CA Official Secrets Act to not declare anything of commercial sensitivity, and they literally redact 95% of their reports. The balance isn't there. And what's the mirage? Well, today these apparatchiks will have you believe it's too expensive to relocate the tram in Wynyard, that the tram no longer serves any purpose in the quarter, and that continued operation is too expensive and that it's not worthy of such an expense. Well, let me tell you, this handful will recommend the public asset, which was built by our public demand, that it be consigned to a museum for the rest of history. They'll claim to be speaking on behalf of the people. They are not. They never asked us. They told us a week ago. We've been scrambling in the middle of lockdown with children under our feet trying to get something together for you guys in the last 5 days. They will claim that their facts are the truth and that they are unbiased parties. They are not, and I haven't got time to tell you why today, but you can ask me and I'll tell you. In 2018, the governing body decreed to reinstate the loop, have the tram running for the America's Cup and review its future. We were told the tram must be given a fair go. We believed we would then have 4 years of uninterrupted operations to give this a go and bed this waterfront tram in the public consciousness and light up these embers that our movement has created. But no, the tram was not even up and running for the commencement of the America's Cup, and only then on weekends, and only then prohibited from operating during America's Cup race days. You know what? We've only had a few weekends since 2018 over one rainy winter, sandwiched between COVID waves and an emptying cities devoid of both commuters or tourists. I say to you, respected councillors, nothing could have been further from the spirit of the 2018 resolution, and if you're trying to knock the breath out of us, you've done it. They'll tell you today, I don't even know who, in something, that it's too expensive to relocate the tram in Wynyard. It's best relocated to Western Springs. Number one, that's an untruth. A relocation to Western Springs involves ripping up the entire 1.5 kilometres of rail loop infrastructure, which only just got completed at considerable expense in March 21, resealing that road and then moving the shed 8 kilometres down the road. It will be far, far cheaper to relocate the tram shed just a few metres away in the quarter and preserve the rail line infrastructure. And then there's their spin. Our state-of-the-art depot, it's a victim of past indiscretions which we've been into plenty of times before, and it should never have been unseated at all without the appropriate provisions for relocation being made at the time. They'll tell you that the tram and its infrastructure no longer serves any purpose in the quarter. And I believe that they're going to dwell on the fact that they are going to tell you that the tram was only built as an attraction and Wynyard is now established and it doesn't need such an attraction. Hogwash. It's an untruth. The purpose of the Auckland Dock Clyde tram is to fulfill the democratic mandate of the original 2011 Auckland waterfront plan for an integrated light rail vision between Britomart Transport and Wynyard Quarter. That's why that current infrastructure exists, and with 600 more metres, we'll make it whole. And in addition, something I could spend an hour talking to you on, the Dockline trams are following purposes: improve city centre transit, adding to city centre attraction, enhancing the city's heritage and culture. Heritage, I could speak forever on. The tram is Auckland, the most environmentally friendly method of mass public transport. Improve transport efficiency, meeting the public mandate. Post-COVID city centre regeneration, improved city safety on city streets, reduced congestion, increased joy of travel, job creation, commuter friendly, and finally, and most importantly, I think to some of you guys who've mentioned to me, fiscal prudence. It's $15 million on the asset sheet, and according to Flow Engineering 10 years ago, who did a report, they said it was by far the best cost-benefit ratio for a transit system. They said keep all public transit off of Fanshawe Street, leave that for the bridge, have all city centre transit going through Wynyard Quarter to Britomart. These people will try and tell you that the continued operation is too expensive and that the project is not worthy of such expense. It's not true. The current OPEX you've been given is perfectly suffice, and most of that OPEX contributes to job creation for the drivers. Over 5 years with a 7-day-a-week operation and with returning city centre life post-COVID, and as the loop beds in, passenger revenues will also steadily increase. Complete that last final 600 metres of the infrastructure to Britomart and you'll see the spigot open. It's all spin. The only thing that may prove a civic project worthy is the public support that it receives. And my God, you're burying us, but I'm going to say it again for the nth time. The Auckland Dockline tram always has been and remains a worthy cause, as evidenced by continuing public support over 10 years. But if you're trying to kill our support and our movement, you're doing a good job. But let me do something that you should have done. You know, the good news, right? We've gone out there. Our research shows that connecting the tram to Britomart, it's eminently viable. We've spoken to LTE Heidelberg in Germany. They're the world's leading tram engineering company for city centre tram infrastructure. And our movement has been working together with the good people in Germany to find a solution to this vision, right? We figured it out. Right? We figured out that we can build a bridge that's identical to the current bascule structure at Tawero that's currently used for pedestrians and cycles. Twins, if you like. Okay? And it will aesthetically fit with the current landscape. We know that that twin bridge would be identical to the current bridge, would cost the same as the original bridge, inflation adjusted. Well, that original bridge was built in 2011 for $3 million. An extra 600 metres of track would add no more than 2 million. Okay, so you've got something that might cost 6 or 7 million and would have a cost benefit ratio, we believe, of well over 2 or 3 once you connect the two districts. Here you go, a little picture given to us by our good friends in Germany. Here would be the route going from Wynyard Quarter over to Tawero Bridge. This just tells us that there is already a steel viaduct that exists just after Tawero Bridge and before Britomart through Auckland Viaduct. We could easily fit the tram through here. It proves that we can hold the tram because the tram's only 5 tonnes. It shows that there's enough height and space. We could keep the old cap gauge for the old rails and put the new standard gauge for the tram in between to show the old port industry's heritage. We'd also recommend an interchangeable stop between this line and the future light rail project that's coming in to Wynyard Quarter, so we can really get that door-to-door service. You know, all over the world, portside trams are a thing. Here we've got Aruba, Rio in Brazil. We've got Alaska in USA. We will have 300,000 plus people, tourists coming back on those cruise ships. More cruise businesses right now are building more cruise ships for post-COVID. We can really easily combine heritage and high-speed trams together, and that's the vision of so many cities that they love. Just here on the right, we've got Adelaide on the top, and we've got the city of Gmunden in Austria. It's very easy and it's beautiful and it creates soul. You know, here's some vision. Here's what LTE have done in Melbourne. And this is really a comparative example to show you on a larger scale what could be done on a smaller scale in our own waterfront. So,
Benita, if we could come to a conclusion now, because we're up to about 12 minutes.
I got 2 more slides, sir. Thank you. So,
movement extension.
What do we recommend to you today? Number 1, do not rip up this thing. First of all, give us the review that you promised and make that an independent review. Okay? The review should include a cost-benefit report reviewing the original vision to connect the waterfront from Britomart by tram. It should be conducted by unbiased, independent participants selected by us and you, the governing body, only. We don't want your apparatus involved anymore. We want the relocation of the tram depot. And I'm telling you now, Panuku broke it. They must fix it. We already have some sites that we have found in Wynyard that are perfectly good for this site. We could even possibly use where the America's Cup bases are. But I'm telling you this, it's got to be done on Panuku's dime, because they broke it, and we believe they broke the law in about 9 or 10 places on the Local Government Act of 2002. And on this matter, our movement will never easily surrender the moral high ground. And if we have to go to court and tie up that West 2 site in knots for years to come, we will. We were promised a fair go in 2018. Since then, we've had barely a dozen weekends. We believe a fair go encompasses no less than a 5-year period of continued operations with appropriate council OPEX, no more than you've done so far, of the tram running 7 days a week. All that OPEX, as I said, is almost all for the drivers. And most importantly, that asset needs to be under council stewardship and operations to be conducted by some small waterfront tram body. The apparatus that you have, as I've said time and time again, is worn us down. It doesn't work. Please, in conclusion, and thank you for the time, we know we've gone over, we calmly and fervently ask with evidence reason, if you rip up this loop, the original mandate and promise evaporates. We can never get it back. And I always say what you yourself have written, and so I gird myself with the promises of yesteryear, my hopes for my tomorrow and my plans for today. This asset was never meant for and doesn't belong in a museum. The report presented to you today by your CCOs is unbalanced, flimsy, and biased. Consent has been manufactured amongst sister organisations on a question that has been framed that doesn't exist. The question they framed is that this attraction, it was built for an attraction, it's just a loop going to nowhere. Do you agree? And of course people are going to agree with that particular premise. But that's not the premise that should be asked. Our recommendation is 3-pronged. We want an independent review, including a cost-benefit report for the whole vision. We want the depot repositioned within Wynyard on Panuku's dime to make up for their past indiscretions. You cannot let them get away with it. And we want to give the tram given a fair go. We say that's 5 years of uninterrupted full-time services. You are the body. We, the people, are the heart. Your agencies and apparatus are just the muscle. Please, body, listen to your heart. Don't let the muscle run amok. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Penny. That was a good presentation. It was a good, solid 15-minute presentation. We appreciate that. I will just put the video on here and look. Appreciate that, Penny. Just look, the word apparatchik is attributed really to blindly loyal followers of communism and fascism, and I don't think that's an appropriate description of Ike Panuku. I think it's going too far, Penny. But look, let's take questions. No, we'll take questions now. No, please hold. Please hold. We'll take questions now from, in this order, from Councillor Fletcher, please. Councillor Fletcher, please, then we'll go to Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got 2 questions, and I find it
it's quite an exciting day because we've had an earlier discussion about light rail, and it's had me thinking that it's not so many years ago there was a plan to demolish Britomart as we know it, the CPO and the heritage buildings around it. And it's what you're reminding me is it's very easy to demolish things, but it's not so easy to actually create things. But I would like to know from your perspective how important heritage has been in building up in other countries and cities support in terms of public transport. Do you have any evidence of that?
Yes, can you all still hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
absolutely. I mean, from Melbourne to Adelaide to Alaska, all those examples that I showed you, they were all old portside cities, and portside cities in particular have got strong affiliations to tram culture and tram heritage. So all those examples that I showed you that are old portside cities have got trams, and all their people wanted to keep that heritage within their cities because they believed that was what gave their cities soul. And we believe that Auckland fits in the same mould.
Thank you for that. My second question is, you've made it very clear that you don't feel that you've had a fair go in terms of evaluation. Can I be quite clear? Are you saying you want 5 years in order that there can be a meaningful evaluation?
Yes, that's the only way. I have my own business. I understand what it takes to bed in brand. We have to light the public consciousness. We already have the public support. Nothing less than 5 years.
Can I just add that since the tramway reopened in February, it's had, I think, approximately 38 days of operation. So any evaluation should be based on a longer period of time than 38 days.
Thanks.
Thank you, David. Now I'll go to Councillor Watson with a question, please.
Yes, thank you for your excellent presentation, Puneet. My question is a double-barreled one, follows on from Councillor Fletcher. In terms of the viability of the trial period today, I mean, at the risk of stating the obvious, I would have thought the disruptions of COVID and the virtual depopulation of the civic centre would make it almost impossible to gauge any notion of how the tram, might be appealing to the wider public. So I'd seek your feedback on that, and at the same time, you could perhaps comment on this notion of the review, which I've just brought up, the resolution of council in 2018, which did refer to a review. Am I right, and from your introductory remarks, that your organisation has not been consulted at all in terms of this? Well, it's an agenda item, it's not a review, but the information that we have got before us today.
I'll address the second question first and maybe let David talk on the trial. But in terms of whatever this thing is that's going to be presented to you today, we've had absolutely no involvement whatsoever. I think we were told about a week ago that there was a decision to recommend to you to dismember the tram, or I don't know what, to give it back to the museum. And it was like the coldest blow we've ever had. And we were so disenfranchised at being told that. And in the middle of lockdown, when we're all working at home, we've got our children, and then somehow we were expected to pull this out of the bag. It was the worst feeling we've ever had. In terms of how much time we've had, we have had absolutely no time in this health crisis to even put any emphasis on this amazing, thing that we've put together, this tram and its infrastructure. David, would you like to speak to the point of whether we've had an opportunity to show off this thing?
I mean, as I said a few moments ago, it's only had 38 days of operation since, and seeing that it would only be operating weekends with some bizarre agreement with AT that exists that only allows it to run on Sundays and public holidays. It's depending on what was spent on ripping up and then relaying 3/4 of the tramway between 2015 and earlier this year. That's and I don't know what the figures are, so my guess is somewhere around about between $3 and $6 million to relay the track bed, put the track back down again, reinstall overhead and services, etc. That if it was say $3 million, then you're looking at for operating for a year, which would be no more than 100 days, because I understand that the proposal as it stands is to operate it to the end of 2022. But that would mean that there would be 2022 Sundays and public holiday days. So with the 38 days already run, maybe another 60 days of operation, it's only about 100 days of operation. So if it was $3 million to reinstall the tramway, it would mean that the cost that the ratepayer, one way or the other, is borne to actually have that tramway reinstalled would be about $30,000 a day. So as a ratepayer, I would be rather alarmed that a utility that essentially was built with a 50-year life is going to only have 100 days of operation, when the whole concern that I understand that Panuki has around the commercial viability, and the commercial viability is never been realised, because what was originally the whole project, which was then termed Phase 2, getting the tramway to Britomart, has never occurred. And that's where the catchment of the railway station, now you've got Commercial Bay, you've got Queen's Wharf with the cruise passengers, etc., some 300,000 people, all down that end of town, that I know that business people that have small businesses around Wynyard Quarter, which would love to have the reticulation of people from the city centre, because their businesses are struggling at the moment. And I look at a really good parallel of San Francisco. They had a major earthquake in the late 1980s, and they had a highway which collapsed, which was on their waterfront. And it was a blessing in disguise, because they removed the highway and they actually installed a streetcar line, which is known as the F line. And that connects several of the wharves, including the Alcatraz Wharf, Fisherman's Wharf, etc., with the city centre. And that is a city of comparable size, and has this wonderful reticulation with heritage vehicles, etc., in the city centre. And it's now been running since the 1990s, and has been a roaring success. So if you want a really good parallel, I'm not talking about the cable cars, I'm talking about the street cars which run, like I say, along the promenade of the waterfront.
Thanks, David. Final question, and that will come from Councillor Wayne Walker, please.
Sure. So I've got a question that follows on from the comments just a moment ago that go to San Francisco, and it's a question around the situation now. I would have thought that there's never been any more important time, probably in the history of Auckland, for the need for regeneration, for getting people into the city, for getting them to use attractions like the Dockline tram, and for looking at a business case to actually consider it in the full context of the alternatives that you're putting up. So my question to you is around whether or not you've had a full go as it goes to engagement, what that engagement and that review looks like in terms of consideration of alternatives to really lift the game and use the Dockline tram as part of the imperative for regenerating the centre city of Auckland, which at present I would suggest is in decline. So what part can the Dockline tram play, and what needs to happen to assist that?
Well, look, I do think that question has actually been covered in the presentation, but Puneet, I'll ask you to repeat what you have said earlier.
Well, I think in terms of engagement and scenarios, we know that we can relocate the tram depot to probably a better site, just a few metres down in Wynyard Quarter that doesn't actually have any development aspirations on it at the moment. And we know that there's a number of ways we can connect along the waterfront to Britomart. And we know that what we know is Fanshawe Street cannot be used for public transit anymore, other than to get people on and off the bridge to North Shore and vice versa. So we cannot run buses up Queen Street, along Fanshawe Street and down into Wynyard if that's how we're going to use mass public transport to move people from the two quarters. Fanshawe Street cannot handle it, and that's a fact. So we have to, whether we like it or not, have a second transport option between the two zones. Okay, that's a fact. And on top of that, when you use the heritage tram combined with the modern light rail tram, which is high speed, you combine both the features of attraction with the features of need. So all those people who come from Northwest, East, South Auckland into Britomart, I was just speaking to the CEO of ASB Bank, I was speaking to the CEO of Park Hyatt. They're telling me that they would love to have this thing. Their commuters come to Britomart and they have to walk over to Wynyard to come to the hotel, for example. They would love to have this. Then you've got people who are tourists who are not in town at the moment, but they would love to go on the heritage tram. And then it goes further than that. You know, once you get to Britomart, well, how are people from St Heliers and Kohimarama getting into town? And how many tourists would love to see our Riviera, which takes us all the way along the water to the other end of town, out to the east? So we've got one of the most beautiful water lines there, and that would combine with Cadiz or San Francisco in that sense. So there's so many things that we can contribute towards the cost-benefit report for a real review.
Thank you, Puneet, and thank you, David. We'll wrap it there. We appreciate you coming in and giving your presentation here today and advocating for retention. We'll be considering that report shortly, and you're welcome to stay on the streaming and watch that debate take place. Councillor Fletcher signalled that she would like to move. Do I have a second? And that, I think, is Councillor Walker. So it's moved and seconded, members. The motion's before us. All those in favour say aye.
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 To the contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you, Puneet, and thank you, David.